So, this week's topic, we're talking about nursing application tips in their lives each week. And I'm just spending the first few weeks in putting some foundations in place about the decisions to move, the mindset dilemmas when nurses feeling quite stuck in their roles and, various aspects of that. So, today's live is about normalising career restlessness and asking the question, is this all there is? Because quite often nurses do question, is there more to this career than moving forward and trying to get into a position that best suits them. So this question is, quite often normalised or quite often experienced by those nurses that are, mid-year, mid-career nurses. So they've done quite a number of years in a chosen area, or maybe have done a few areas that they actually start questioning, is this all there is? Is there something else out there that I should be doing or aspiring to do? It may come also with high responsibility, the emotional aspects of the job. And of course, when you're a bit limited with career progression, then this may trigger this question for a lot of people. Even when you appear to be quite successful, you can actually say this question to yourself. The second point, I've actually got 10 points here that I wanted to talk about today. The second point is about, is it career restlessness that's due to a lack of gratitude? So maybe you're wanting more meaning in your life. Your sense of purpose is not being fulfilled. Maybe you're wanting some more flexibility, or the impact of this doesn't mean that you don't value what you're doing. It is your value being seen by others, and that all comes down to self-worth. My third point is about burnout versus boredom versus an evolution in nursing. So if you haven't watched the last two episodes of the lives, then go back to watch that, because I did spend quite a bit of time about burnout and malalignment of your role. When your job becomes your, how to actually tell. One of the things that I mentioned during that live in the last episode was, you know, that having a rest or making a change may not make a difference to where you are, and that may identify that you are actually a bit burnt out from your role. Or do you actually looking for a completely new direction? The fourth tip or point that I want to make is about the identity trap in nursing. So once a nurse, always a nurse. That may not be the case. And if you're grow up in nursing, that you have a nursing, high nursing content in your family tree, then sometimes there is an expectation that you're going to follow that suit. When your job actually becomes a part of who you are, so you find that you do become a nurse in your outside hours, that you take on board those levels of responsibility. And when you're not achieving or not getting those successes that you want, you actually kind of feel like a little bit of a failure that you haven't achieved what you set out to do. My fifth point is why healthcare conditions amplify restlessness. What you've got there are, system pressures. You've got staffing shortages. You've got moral distress. So there's a lot of conflicts in the decisions that you make that you may have to follow, the direction that you don't 100% personally agree with, and constant change identified intensifies this, is that it kind of comments. I often hear comments that people make to say, I'm living the dream. Well, underneath that, they're not actually living the dream. They're actually slogging away and wanting to do more than this. The sixth point that I want to make is normalizing your career cycle. So careers, they're not a straight line. They're actually a peak and trough, opportunity and continuation of working hard. It comes in waves, and it comes in plateaus quite often. So that we know that there are peaks and troughs in nursing career cycles when people are employing. We know that and certainly in my experience, when they've actually got New hospitals being built. There's new opportunities. There's new career cycles. People get moved sideways into project jobs. They move into other positions and roles in a temporary capacity to create that movement within the systems and organisations. So those opportunities, they may come up in abundance, or they may actually be a drought. So your career pathway is not a direct line. It can come in waves. You'll notice that too, that when you do take advantage of those opportunities, and this is my seventh point, small shifts that reignite your purpose can actually, re-spark your interest in what you're doing. Moving laterally into temporary roles, doing some project work, or moving into education, or taking on some mentoring or portfolios, so project management. That can be a low risk exploration of a potential career path. And I quite often had encouraged a lot of my nurses that I worked with or managed, to take up on those opportunities if they are actually of interest. In fact, I actually encourage them to do that, because it doesn't help you to stay in the one job, the one time, the whole career. We encourage people to move and switch. Point number eight, is it fear that keeps people stuck? So the fear of movement, the fear of transitioning out of nursing, one of the big factors that stops people is their lack of a consistent income. Because, that is a risk that you take. You need to kind of sort of look at the compromise of income versus the career progression or the step stone that that's actually going to give you in the long term. The status role. So for me, often I had worked as a nurse unit manager, and then I went back to doing clinical work at the bedside and in the community. And a lot of people said to me, Wendy, you're crazy. You've actually got a really good middle management job, but it wasn't ticking all the boxes for me. I still had that sense of purpose and that contribution that I wanted to give to my community. So there was that status associated, and earlier point about identity, moving identity from this to that. Looking at factors of confidence. So you might be quite confident in one area, but when you move into a temporary area, your confidence level can take a bit of a dive, and it takes a lot to kind of get on the wheels and get going with a new sense of confidence. Being too old to change. A lot of people feel that, they've been doing this for quite some time and that's too old. Like they don't want to learn any new skills. And to me, that's been quite limiting. You look at me, I transitioned out of nursing 4 years ago, and I've done, remarkably well in the 4 years that I've been working as a book strategist part-time, but I still have that passion for nursing. This is why I'm doing this. But the underlying factor of that is that I did have an open mind to learn new skills or enhance the skills that I had to move into another position. So, those that lack of confidence sometimes exaggerates those fears. And when you make the bold decision, then you need to give yourself some time and space to be able to transition into those opportunities with success. Point number 9, restlessness as information. It's not a problem. So seeing discomfort as data pointing to unmet values, strengths, or desires. So what's actually underlying all of that restlessness? Is it to do with your workplace, or is it a deep-seated insecurity of yours that might be there, that the job situation and what's actually happening is enhancing that underlying restlessness? And if you feel that that is happening, then of course you need to, seek some professional support around that. And point number 10, giving yourself permission to move into that next chapter. I think that's really important because that ties in with your confidence, and giving yourself permission and that space to be able to move successfully. You don't need to, have an emotional breakdown to prove a point. You can actually transition quite successfully. Intentional transitions, they are valid, and they're very powerful because you're demonstrating your value and your worth in your new positions. So they're the 10 points that I wanted to make around this topic. I'll just see if there's anybody in the Zoom. No. And if you've got any comments or anything that you'd like to ask, then feel free to write that in the comment section. So I'll just cover off the 10 points again. So point number one is, this is a common phrase, the common thought to those that are in mid career, in their mid career, to be able to question, is that all there is in nursing? What is there more to do? Number two is career restlessness, or is there a lack of gratitude? Point number three, burnout versus boredom, or versus an evolution in your career. Identity trap in nursing is point number four. Number five, why healthcare conditions amplify the restlessness. So I talked about a little bit about this last week. The situation that is currently happening in the busy workplaces. Is that what the issue is, or whether the point number six, normalising career cycles, recognising that it is not a linear growth, that it does actually have some peaks and troughs and some abundance of opportunities versus nothing that comes up for a while. So recognising that your career cycle isn't a fluid circle or isn't a line straight up. It can actually, go sideways and all over the place. Point number seven, small shifts may reignite your sense of purpose. So taking on that temporary contract, looking at opportunity, such as moving into education, moving into same but different vocations, maybe, switching up from medical nursing in a hospital through to practicing in a medical community-based service. Point number eight, is it fear that keeps people stuck? Or is there an underlying sense of fear that is undermining that feeling? And point number nine, restlessness as information, not a problem. Is this, a prompt for you to actually ask for additional information, a different, exploring, why you're actually thinking like that? And point number 10 is to give yourself permission to change. So backing yourself, identifying your skills and getting out there and, doing something that is going to tick that sense of fulfillment. So thank you for joining me today. And I just want to let you know that next week's live will be around the topic of, why saying that you're comfortable can stall your nursing career. So we're going to explore and unpack that a little bit more next week. If you do have any questions, queries, or anything that you want to ask about where you are at the moment, feel free to write a comment or ask me a question after the live is completed and posted. Happy to come back there and answer your questions. So that's all for me for this week. I look forward to next week in Your Nurse Voice Matters with our applications tip. Next week's topic is why staying comfortable can stall your nursing career. We'll see you then. Hi everyone, it's Wendy here for our weekly live. Sorry I'm a little bit late this afternoon. Got a little bit busy with the work that I do 6 hours a day with Natasha Denman. Today I wanted to jump on, and this is the second part of a two-part for the podcast as well that I'm doing. And today I wanted to talk a little bit around the hidden costs of staying in the same role for too long. So we all know many nurses do actually stay in the role for a very long time, and usually the reason is because they're enjoying the role. They're getting a lot of satisfaction out of doing what they're doing, which is fantastic, and that's what we like to see. We know that longevity brings expertise, it brings stability to the unit that they're working in. Other nurses will look up to them for an active resource and mentorship in the unit. However, the flip side of that, there are some aspects of staying in a nursing role for too long that can be quite detrimental, not only to you, but also to the community that you serve. So I'll just run through 5 things that I have for you around staying in that role for too long. So the first thing that comes to mind is career drift without any direction or compass to be able to move forward. So time passes really quickly. Healthcare systems, they're running very quickly on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes you're in the work so much that there's not much time to pause and do some planning for your future career path. Time passes really, really quickly. Without intentional moves or taking that time out to reflect on where you want to go, then time can go by and you'll realise that time has gone by and there's been no growth or projections. We don't like to see that. You don't get stagnant in your role. It's a day-to-day grind. It doesn't really allow for any growth or personal development. I'll just mention anyone that's watching live, feel free to make a comment underneath. If you feel that this is you're talking my language, would love to get that feedback and what, your experience is there. For those that have the Zoom link, my Zoom is open and I'm recording this as well for the YouTube. So if you're wanting to join in live and have anything to further contribute or offer to this topic about staying in the role longer, then feel free to participate. The second thing that I have for you is lots of transferable confidence. So when your strengths, and I do a lot of work with coaching nurses about identifying what your key strengths are, when they're not used, they can actually decrease in the value. So maybe you feel that you're only good in that role. You become a little bit blinded by the transferable skills that you can do in another transition. And you feel that when you do make that transition or that breakaway, it's actually harder to go through that transition phase. With nurses that move around every 3 or 4 years or whatever period that is, if it's a reasonably shorter chunk of time, we do find that the resilience of our nurses is there because they're adapt to change and flexibility, and they learn things a lot quicker. The third thing is around your personal impact. So sometimes it can have a physical and emotional toll on you. And I write in my book in Transitions that sometimes you don't actually recognise that over a long period of time. We've spoken on previous discussions over the last few weeks about burnout in nursing. It's a common thing. It's a common thing in, all the professions where you're actually giving yourself to the community or to a service, that burnout can sneak up on you. So the role, if you're staying in that, the symptoms that we often associate with burnout and fatigue often go unnoticed for a period of time. It can evoke some stress-related responses that then become a chronic stress accumulation, and you don't recognise that, and time moves on. The symptoms you tend to normalise or accept as a part of your normal life or coping mechanism, when really it's causing you some physical and emotional harm. The fourth thing is around the lack of opportunity for missed income and the leadership pathways. So definitely I hear stories all the time, and in one way I actually experienced this myself, is that if you stay in the one role, or you're made to stay in the one role, so the opportunities are not afforded to you, then you may be missing out on some potential income based on your skills and ability. The leadership, the opportunities, they may not be put forward to you. And the fifth thing is around your burnout. Your burnout becomes your exit strategy, and we really just don't want to see that. So nurses staying in the role over a long period of time do become quite fatigued, and I've worked with nurses in that situation. And sometimes, a kind word or a shoulder tap really, highlights to them, do you really want to stay in this role? Is there something else that you could be wanting to do in the long term? That they leave when burnout actually forces them to leave, which is less than ideal. And to be honest with you, sometimes that is a management strategy, and I'll be quite honest about that. They want to retain nurses in there and get to that fatigue, exhaustion state, and then you you're delving into performance issues, and that's just a spiral. You don't really want to get into that. So there's some of the hidden costs of staying in the wrong role too long. I actually put this question up into a group that I belong to, and I got a plethora of answers around the cost to your family, the cost to your loved ones, the cost to you, your identity. There were a lot of feedback around that. So I really appreciate those comments, and I acknowledge everybody with those comments as well. So that's all I have for you today for this live. So next Wednesday, I'm actually going to talk or spend some time around when frustration is actually a signal for growth. And this was my experience the last 4 or 5 years of my clinical nursing experience. I became more and more easily frustrated with a few things. Of course, acted professionally and respectful communication, all that sort of thing. But I want to spend some time around that, because sometimes if you're feeling a little bit grr, then that is a signal or an inner signal for you to actually identify that maybe you need to be looking at some other option or get some mentoring. Just say hello to Wayne. Thanks for joining me, Wayne, and nice to have you here. So I'll sign off now. Finish the recording. These recordings on a Wednesday are available also on my podcast called Your Nurse Voice Matters, where I'm collating all of these. There'll be 2 live editions on each of the podcasts that I'll release as a solo podcast. And I've got some really exciting speakers coming up in the near future. So Toni Hoffman, if you've ever heard of her, she's actually being recorded tomorrow. So watch out for that episode in the next month. So for those that don't know her, look her up. She was the whistleblower on the Dr. Patel incidences that happened around the Bundaberg Hospital back in the early 2000s. And I'm very appreciative of her time to come on board and talk to her. Not so much about, well, obviously we'll be talking about that situation, but from her perspective on patient advocacy and how strong that is for nurses everywhere. Very applicable. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.